we must be honest as a country that we are not where we were, we are not where we want to be, but we are definitely not where we were. My job is to make sure that we get there. And we are going to bring social cohesion. We are one nation. We are the children of Nelson Mandela. We should not let those ones that want to detract us, those ones that want to separate us, those ones that want to divide us, we should not even give an ear to those. We should lend our ears to people that come with ideas for us to go forward. The meeting started with us thanking the acting president, deputy president, for what he has done for the arts, the sport, arts and culture sector. But he was arts and culture. We spoke about things like the Mzansi Golden Economy, which he pioneered, which he started, which is still today one of our flagship programs. And we thanked him for the good work he's done. Then the meeting proceeded where we shared that where the acting president was clear when it comes to social cohesion, but also accountability, and also the fact that we should involve the private sector, and we should also go around the country and go look at our monuments, go and look at our history to share it with the upcoming youth. We then shared with him that we are repatriating our heroes, the likes of Duma Nokwe, Bethel February, Mef Florence, and that is the president will be leading that ceremony in the next few weeks, where you will get an invite. What we spoke about our intention to bring the F1 as the first African country. We did have it in 2003, but some of you are still at kindergarten. Look at your usefulness. We spoke about power slip that we intend to bring to South Africa, normally known as Chisampama. We spoke about our world champion Dricus being the world champion UFC fighter, and we spoke about the fact that we want to bring, that we are nearly there to bring UFC, the next world championship fight, to South Africa and Africa as a whole. We then spoke about the more important issue, that social cohesion. We must be honest as a country that we are not where we were, we are not where we want to be, but we are definitely not where we were. My job is to make sure that we get there. Many people also speak behind my back and behind corners, and I'm not the first minister they said that about. When it comes to the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, that this is a junior department. This is a department that's not being taken serious. And when you go to places like France, they congratulate me and say, you've got the most important minister. The deputy president, acting president now told me, when I do this, I'm not saying this is the deputy president. Because I see Rakis is smiling. I say the deputy, then I speak with my hands. He also told me that in Italy, people feel the same way about the arts, that is part of the golden economy. And we are going to bring social cohesion. We are one nation. We are the children of Nelson Mandela. We should not let those ones that want to detract us, those ones that want to separate us, those ones that want to divide us, we should not even give an ear to those. We should lend our ears to people that come with ideas for us to go forward. And one of the most important things we discussed was the fact that we shared with the acting president that for 30 years in this country, the same conversation about transformation in sport has been happening. I think it was Einstein that said if you do the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, that's insanity. So we don't want to follow the insanity route. Hence, the debate or the discussion will shift to where it should have started, which is you can't expect equal outcomes if there's no equal access. You can't expect the black swimmers at the Olympics, but there's no pools. It's madness. You can't expect a pole vaulting champion from black people to be represented at pole vaulting and swimming, but there's no pole vaulting met pole. It can't be. And I assured the acting president that my term, the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, would want to be a term where I make sure that arts, community halls get used for its purposes, for community theatre, community functions every day, because it can't be at the moment it's not being fully utilized. You use the community hall twice or 3 times if you are lucky, but we're going to turn that into community theatres where it should be. Today you train, tomorrow you perform, and because we take the art serious. We're also going to fight very hard to make sure that artists get recognized as workers. We can't be treating our artists and our creatives as if they are not being recognized as workers. They can't go and buy a car and give 3 months bank statements or buy a house. It can't be. It's an indictment on us. And we want to fix that. And we are going to fix that. Because artists are workers. They contribute 3% to the GDP of this country. The same as agriculture. We can't treat them like they are just there to make us laugh, to make us happy.
Yeah, guys, another really interesting one from Gayton Mckenzie. He actually has hit the ground running, as many media outlets have actually spoken about. He's been really busy trying to really show the importance of the sports ministry in South Africa. And I think it's really interesting and important, also for me personally, to really understand the role that sports has to play in galvanizing our nations, especially as such a nation as racially and culturally sensitive as South Africa. And so I think Gayton Mckenzie has been doing an excellent job so far in trying to bring that to the consciousness of the people so that we really understand the role sports has to play in really uniting such a really, kind of like a nation like South Africa in that regard. So, but for this video, I thought that I have some really critical news, but also some good news, because Gayton Mckenzie has actually been working on the DSTV sports deal, which has covered how many South Africans have complained that they are unable to watch the games by the Springboks, on the national, I think SABC also. So Gayton Mckenzie is actually looking for a way to kind of like be able to provide those games so that people can watch them on TV, DSTV. And so that deal is actually a promise is made, and making a report going forward on how far he's gone with that. But also Thabo Mbeki has actually come up in a criticism against Gayton Mckenzie in his Mahabambe rhetoric, saying that the whole thing with Afrophobia and xenophobia might actually spiral downwards in a way that we're seeing in the UK today, and that might be what might percolate in South Africa. And I thought that we'll just really analyze these two reports really quickly to really understand Gayton Mckenzie's positionality and the pros and cons of his approach as a sports minister, and what we could really expect from that. So there's a report on Times Live here. It actually says that, former President Thabo Mbeki has actually drawn parallels between the UK and South Africa, warning that negative forces could actually use xenophobic Afrophobia to actually engage in what he calls a moronic inferno, and labeling sports minister, arts and culture minister Gayton Mckenzie as one of such proponents. So he's actually arguing that Gayton Mckenzie might be one of such proponents that is actually using, this whole the force of xenophobic Afrophobia to really create a sort of like inferno that might erupt in South Africa. So I think it's a really interesting and important warning, although it might sound negative, because Gayton Mckenzie has become really a poster boy for unity and, anti-racial divide, so to speak, in South Africa. But it's also interesting to also note some of these downsides that might erupt from his positive policies in trying to unite South Africa, you see, especially if we consider the recent bolt scandal, the boat, I could call that an inferno between Nigeria and South Africa, where the two countries actually ordered boat drivers to different locations, and when they got to their location, they cancelled the orders. And I think it's really, really embarrassing in a way for both South Africa and Nigeria to be engaging in such a childish, kind of like debacle, so to speak, because the people we're toying with here are families. You see, many of these boat drivers are actually families who actually have families to feed, and so you don't mess up with their economy, you don't mess up with their family, like just because of a feud that's actually driven by racial or probably other sensitive issues. You see, so that's kind of like, I think, where Thabo Mbeki might be coming from, in that we might have to be careful in how Gayton Mckenzie, especially from the perspective of sports, arts, and culture, might have to be careful in the way he actually is pursuing the mantra of unity in South Africa. Although it's really a good thing, but these are kind of like side warnings. And I know Thabo Mbeki is also a really critical thinker who actually thinks from multiple sides to really see possible scenarios that might erupt from what everyone might actually perceive as something really good. Okay. So Thabo Mbeki actually believes that the UK riots, they have a lesson to teach South Africa, and he's sounding warning bells against a looming riotous rampage. Okay, so he's actually sounding a warning bell that we might be seeing riots in South Africa now in a way that actually erupted in in the UK because of this anti-foreigner rhetoric, so to speak. So anyway, he says that in July, the report says in July, a mentally disturbed individual fatally stabbed 3 children aged between 6 and 9 in England, spreading widespread riots, all right? And that after a vigil was held in their honor, following the evening, attendees attacked a nearby mosque, and police officers on standby with 27 cops admitted for treatment in a hospital, and one vehicle was officially set on fire, all right? One official vehicle was set on fire. Now, it says that anger was actually allegedly driven by news spread on social media that the murderer of the girl was a Muslim asylum seeker who illegally arrived on a boat. So this is the role of media, the role social media plays in trying to drive most of this narrative that might end up spiraling into something that might not be expected, especially in the likes of South Africa at the moment with the xenophobia and the foreigners. So it says, the report says that this is despite a police probe that actually established that the culprit was a 17-year-old boy whose parents legally migrated from Rwanda. However, this declaration did not stop the riots, which lasted for a few days. Okay. Now, it also reports that King Charles III had actually sent a heartfelt appeal and call for the nation to unite around shared values and mutual respect and understanding. So Thabo Mbeki now says that Thabo Mbeki felt like this image resonates with the South African reality, which is an image of those who feel excluded and abandoned. All right. Now, the report says that in the UK, it took the propagation of a false story about the murder of 3 English children by an illegal Muslim illegal Muslim migrant to drive these neglected and ignored people into a riotous rampage. All right. Now, also, Mbeki is also quoting here. He actually said, Mbeki quoted a writer, Jason Cowley, who actually had said that the riot had revealed an England atomized and an England in pieces. Mbeki said that, much like England, South Africa must find ways to include those who feel excluded and abandoned in a new national story. Now, Coley, also the guy Mbeki refers to, said that the excluded, especially in the UK, were not the far right, but the people of the peripheral England for whom democratic policies are not working, who don't vote for the Labour Party or any other party, the neglected, the ignored, the impoverished, the reviled, and the mutinous. What do you do about these people and their anger, suffering, and despair? So this is actually now the UK parallel, okay? So it appears that, the people of England themselves, the UK people, seem to have become excluded by their own country's politics. And so that anger was just a reflection of that exclusion, so to speak. And Thabo Mbeki is actually saying now that many South Africans also feel excluded. The rightful owners of the country are slowly, in a way, feeling excluded by the politics and probably the neoliberal approach that the government has actually taken in trying to advance development in the nation. But many South Africans actually have slowly started feeling excluded within their own land, and so all that is needed to spark a kind of riot we saw in the UK could just be a false social media post, a false narrative, and the country could descend into chaos. And also being fueled by what South Africa's character now is actually the character of the riots that might evolve in South Africa is actually one that is actually dominated by what Thabo Mbeki now calls an Afrophobic xenophobia. You see, so that's the possibility or the possible future scenario that might erupt in such a riot that could emanate or emerge from South Africa's reality. And so he's actually just sending a really light warning. The report says that Mbeki believes that the same reality resonates strongly in South Africa for those who feel excluded and abandoned. All right. Now, in the UK, 40% of voters boycotted the July 4th elections, while in South Africa, 60% actually stayed away from May elections. So you see the interesting parallel he's trying to build between the UK and South Africa, you see. Now, also, it's actually arguing here that as in the UK, these are not right-wing people. However, they feel that the democratic politics is not working for them in South Africa. In many instances in the past, they did not vote for the ANC or any other party, but they continue to belong among the neglected, the ignored, and the impoverished, the reviled, and the mutinous. So he says that, he warned, Thabo Mbeki is now warning that this might be used by negative forces to incite a similar riotous rampage in South Africa. Cowell is actually also saying, this report also saying that given the sordid response to the Miss South Africa candidacy of Miss Chidima Adesina, it could easily happen that such negative forces in South Africa could use xenophobic Afrophobia to engage in a moronic inferno to which Jason Cowley referred to, that's actually happening in the UK. And so should such a grouping arise, Thabo Mbeki warned that they would be encouraged because those who take great pride in demanding Mabahambe, that's the Patriotic Alliance and Gayton Mckenzie, and others of the same ilk, they are actually now sitting in parliament and in government, okay? So one proponent of this "they must go" statement is current sports, art, and minister Gayton Mckenzie, who boasts of 9 seats in the parliament. So this is actually now Thabo Mbeki actually analyzing Gayton Mckenzie as sports minister. He says that Thabo Mbeki claimed that the country must also underline xenophobic Afrophobia as an important part of the political agenda of the counter-revolution. This is the counter-revolution that the ANC decided to embark on upon taking power in 1994 and all of that. So Thabo Mbeki now says that, quoting Cowley, he actually says that he highlighted this interpretation of the UK riot, saying that the harrowing ethno-sectarian violence and racist attacks in recent weeks on mosques and hotels sheltering asylum seekers in provincial towns have revealed something dark and shocking, which is an England that is atomized and an England in pieces. And he's hoping that, the current xenophobic Afrophobia, which he speaks about, that might be emerging in South Africa, does not necessarily reflect a South Africa that is atomized and a South Africa in pieces, but rather that, much more wisdom should actually be involved in trying to really create this new patriotism that's emerging in South Africa at the moment, that it doesn't descend into this kind of violence riots where we see, the excluded and the marginalized in South Africa, the South Africans themselves descend into this kind of inferno, this violence that would then eventually damage the patriotic fever that's actually already slowly building up in the country, but also just cautioning that, the whole Mabahambe rhetoric and, the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture should just take caution. And I think this is actually an interesting one because Gayton Mckenzie, I saw a recent video where he is actually inviting, I think, Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia is a boxer who was actually banned, I think, from the Boxing Confederation or something like that for racist slurs against blacks. And Gayton Mckenzie openly invited him to the possibility that the next UFC fight that was won by Driscoll could be brought back to South Africa. So it appears that Gayton Mckenzie really kind of like uses that rhetoric of inviting someone who has been actually openly racist. I think he actually said the F word to, he says the F word to the N word and also Muslims, you see. So Ryan Garcia, he actually apologized also in a post, this Ryan Garcia, for insulting, using racist slurs against blacks and Muslims. But anyway, the fact that Gayton Mckenzie wants to invite him and tries to really assuage that distance that had actually been created by Ryan Garcia and blacks and Muslims, trying to bring him, to invite him, show that courtesy and draw him close, actually speaks of a personality of Gayton Mckenzie. Probably he's trying to really break through that rhetoric of, raciality in that regard as South Africa. So trying to show the narrative that South Africa is not a racial nation, that no matter how much you have these racist views about a certain group of people, we will embrace you with love and then probably have you reconsider your outlook in life. And so I think that's where Gayton Mckenzie tried to really move towards in his invitation to Ryan Garcia, who has actually been noted in the media as someone who's openly racist and the like. So this is a Thabo Mbeki's warning to, Gayton Mckenzie, the new emerging patriotism that is actually growing out of South Africa and South Africans at the moment, that, South Africa should be careful. South Africans also should be careful that, as much as the patriotism is actually growing, there should actually be caution so that it doesn't descend into the kind of inferno that would end up burning the country down, burning the country, businesses and all that, down in the pursuit of the unity and the patriotism that South Africans so desperately desire at the moment, you see. But anyway, let's get on to the second report that actually speaks about Gayton Mckenzie's deal with with DSTV to really try to provide sports coverage for South Africans, to be able to watch the national sports on live TV, you see. So it argues that Sports Minister Gayton Mckenzie has actually promised his department is working on a deal to allow South Africans to watch the Springboks and All Blacks Springboks versus All Blacks rugby match this coming weekend without a DSTV subscription. So he says that this comes after a back and forth exchange on social media where some commentators accused Gayton Mckenzie of lying when SuperSport issued a seemingly contradictory statement. Newsroom is actually quoted saying that, "I have got very bad news. I met with Newsroom Africa," now quoting Gayton Mckenzie, says that Mckenzie says, "I have got very bad news. I met with SuperSport and I'm happy to tell you that you will be able to watch the Springboks and New Zealand game even if you do not have a decoder, okay?" But however, SuperSport then issued another statement saying 6 hours later, saying that there was no deal yet. So a lot of people on media actually accused the sports minister of telling lies and that, how that saga went down. So following SuperSport's evening statement, Twitter was awash with comments accusing Gayton Mckenzie of telling lies, you see. And Mckenzie then responded on Saturday saying that, SuperSport had actually made it clear that how much is SABC needed to pay to make a deal happen and that he was working on that solution. He actually says nobody lied, okay? But anyway, Mckenzie also said that, we know the terms and expectations from the rights holders for us to make this available, and we intend to fully meet these expectations in the interest of the nation. This is not a normal game. That this is the anniversary of the most important rugby game, you see, and so Mckenzie then clarified to the government that he clarified that the government will not expect SuperSport to give SABC matches for free because SuperSport is also a business and, it runs as a business. So to provide, this game for free would mean crushing their business. This is Gayton Mckenzie's perspective. And so he actually sees that in a balanced way, both from SuperSport's side and SABC's side. So Mckenzie also saying, "I have been clear that it will be unfair of government to expect SuperSport to show matches for free, matches that have been paid for. It is our task to make sure that we as government play our part in making sure our people also get to watch their national team," says Mckenzie. So Mckenzie is challenging government approach in sports. SuperSport has actually operated as a private business, so to speak, so providing games are based on a subscription fee. But Gayton Mckenzie wants to flip that around, especially challenging government to be able to work to provide the games, allow SuperSport to carry out their business, but also, use government power, government funds to provide these games so that the wider South Africans can watch. And I remember one of the times in the Scandinavia where I actually am based, I think it was one of the World Cups, so to speak. I think the nation of Finland also, or I think some of the Nordic countries anyway, decided as a nation from the perspective of the government to provide the World Cup games, for their citizens in these countries, you see. So it was now the government's responsibility probably to buy the rights or something to provide the games to be watched for free by the citizens. And this is actually a gesture of government. This is a way to show social cohesion and increase trust that the citizenry can have actually in a government, so that this shows that, we are for you. These are kind of like the little things to build trust, because in my country, Nigeria, for example, trust is actually a capital that seems to be washing away. A lot of Nigerians do not trust the government, you see, but there are these little tweaks that can actually be done by government to slowly start building trust, with the citizenry, that even though the government fails in many respects, but that tinge of trust, the citizens can always remember that move and actually still keep on hoping that the government knows what it's doing. And so I think this is the perspective Gayton Mckenzie is trying to push the ANC, the government of national unity, to try to really, if it means buying the rights from SuperSport, not crushing SuperSport's business, but kind of like providing those rights so that ordinary South Africans can watch these games for free. In a way, people might think that that's just a dump move, but it's a move that actually slowly now builds the trust that is required as a foundation to develop the growing patriotism that's actually emerging out of South Africa at the moment. So anyway, the report says that Mckenzie issued a friendly warning to broadcasters, saying that it was wrong that just one of them could decide who has access to the events featuring the country's national teams, okay? The national team doesn't belong to MultiChoice or SABC or ETV. None of them should act like the national team belongs to them, says Gayton Mckenzie. He's also saying that I'm going to be an enabler of the majority of our people not being able to watch the national rugby or soccer team. If the broadcasters didn't find their own solution, Mckenzie said he would use already existing legislation to force them to allow more South Africans to be able to watch their national teams. He says that, Gayton Mckenzie speaking, I intend to fully use that legislation. We are meeting with them. As we say, we come in peace, but if they want war, they will get war. This is now Gayton Mckenzie speaking. Gayton Mckenzie, he seems to appear, he presents himself as one who has actually come from the perspective of war. You see, and I remember when I spoke about how when Helen Zille was asked about, Cyril Ramaphosa, Helen Zille spoke about the fact that Ramaphosa is a good man. He's a really good person. Personally, he has a good personality, okay, but that he might not be brave. And in politics today, South Africa, bravery is required. There are lots of cabals, there are lots of mafia, guiding. I think I even saw a report, even the construction has a mafia. I think I'll be making a report on that. There's a video on the construction mafia in KZN, that before you can make adequate development happen in South Africa, especially in the area of construction, there's a mafia that has to be confronted. And so to confront that mafia, there's a certain level of bravery that's needed, and a passion and a commitment to purpose. One has to really understand that they are called for this, and before you can engage in that battle, because it can actually be a dangerous battle, a long-term battle with the mafia that actually guards certain industries. So Gayton Mckenzie understands this, and then he actually now comes against the media mafia, saying that he's coming in peace, in trying to provide and fight for South Africans to be able to watch their games for free. But if that peace doesn't work, he's actually also ready to give war for war, so that South Africans, a wider ordinary South African, can actually watch the national games for free. And I think that's a worthy fight, because at the end of the day, if I recall when Nel de Beer realized that SABC wouldn't be airing the Springboks game, I think, against New Zealand, he actually felt really embarrassed. He actually said it's a national embarrassment that South Africa cannot provide the opportunity for South Africans to watch such a nationally cohesive game as the Springboks and New Zealand, so to speak. And so from that perspective, Gayton Mckenzie wants to go head to head with these guys and try to really, use legislation from government to make sure South Africans can all watch the games going forward. Gayton Mckenzie now says that following meetings with the broadcasters early in August, Gayton Mckenzie now says that, we had a very progressive meeting as multi-choice group, and that I thank them for the billions they poured into sports, arts and culture, says Gayton Mckenzie. He says that they've spoken about solutions regarding the problems of access to main matches by most South Africans, and that he left the meeting highly impressed and that the future is really bright. So he says that the report here also says that eMedia and SABC have been battling multi-choice sports rights exclusively, including live matches featuring South Africa's national rugby and cricket teams. He says that the fight centers around restrictions that MultiChoice has actually placed on the rights it's sub-licensed to the SABC. So the SABC has rights that have been sub-licensed from MultiChoice, okay? And so SABC must function within those rights. And so it's not SABC's, according to this report, it's not SABC's prerogative to show matches at will, but they have to operate within the rights that have actually been given to them from MultiChoice. And so this whole thing is a really business. It's a network of, deals and, industries that end up being really sort of like almost a mess. And so probably from the perspective of nationalization, if we think about the EFF mantra on nationalization, I'm not saying that nationalization would be the key here, but somehow the government might need to step up in its ownership of a certain provision for media, if it means buying the rights, if it means doing business within that domain to make sure that they provide for South Africans as a nation. I think that would be a really interesting perspective to understanding nationalization, especially within the sports domain. But anyway, going forward, it says that under the terms of their most recent deals, the SABC was not allowed to broadcast the Springboks and Protea matches on its channels on eMedia's OpenView platform during their respective World Cup matches. Okay. Now, when eMedia and SABC cried foul, MultiChoice explained that without the restriction, the sub-license would have been made more expensive. All right. Now, eMedia then took the matter to the competition tribunal on the ground that it was anti-competitive, which granted an interdict blocking MultiChoice and the SABC from enforcing or abiding their agreements that included this restriction. So it is a really big mess that Gayton Mckenzie might need to really get into to ratify this whole thing. But anyway, it says that by the time the interdict was granted, the Rugby and Cricket World Tournament was already finished, okay? However, when Ireland played the Springboks in a recent test series, SABC announced at the last minute that it would no longer be able to broadcast the matches and that the South African Rugby Union, SARU, issued a statement casting eMedia as the villain in this whole saga. Now, SARU says that eMedia wanted a free ride while MultiChoice provided substantial financial support to South Africa's sporting teams. Now, it appears that eMedia here seems to be like according to this report, the bad baddie, so to speak, that actually didn't want to cooperate with this whole arrangement to provide the games. But it says here that the eMedia took issue with this blame, saying that it had made significant financial offers to MultiChoice to broadcast the Ireland test matches in Pretoria and Durban, but MultiChoice rejected. It's also complained that MultiChoice actually had only opened a tender for free-to-air broadcasters to bid for sub-licensing rights a little over a month before the tournament commenced. The broadcasting said that the late posting of the tender meant bidders likely wouldn't receive confirmation until less than 2 weeks before the kickoff of the games. So eMedia then views the issuing of these late invitations to tender by MultiChoice as undermining fair competition and ignoring a recent competition tribunal order designed to prevent such restrictive practices. However, MultiChoice issued a statement shortly afterwards saying that it had rejected eMedia's offer because it was too low. So we see that business is actually the crux of this whole thing. It's all about business and who makes profit and what not, you see. And so to the detriment and to the especially the detriment of the South African. So as a national of my own nation, I'm not able to watch my national game because of the business that actually goes on in the high places, you see. And so this is something that probably the government of national unity might want to look into At least, even though there are many things wrong with South Africa and many African nations, unemployment and most of these vices, if the government could actually sacrifice to make sure that the ordinary South African is able to watch some of these national games that bring sort of like a joy and a confidence in the nation for free, I think that would be one way to start negotiating this capital I call trust in the land of South Africa, so that the people can start slowly feeling the trust that is needed to allow them support the government of national unity going forward. We still have 5 years to go, and there's still there's still a vision and objectives in the pipeline. And so this particular one, especially being now trying to driven by Gayton Mckenzie, I think is a bull kind of like move. It's going to be difficult because there are these really big moguls in this media business. I know that because I'm also interested in media. I know that there are business moguls. There are even we could even likely call them mafia in the media space that actually own licensing rights, and it's a really big. It's a game on its own, and so it's one of those areas that a government, the force of a government, might be able to interfere with and try to probably buy up some rights or so, just to provide some of these games, even if it's not all the time. But when this kind of special national leagues come up, the government should intervene to make sure that the ordinary citizen of South Africa can actually watch these national games. But anyway, these are some of the reports I thought that I'll share. Really interesting, powerful reports that Thabo Mbeki is actually warning that South Africa doesn't descend into the kind of inferno we're seeing in the UK at the moment, where Afrophobic xenophobia, so to speak, then becomes the source, because South Africa seems to be at that point, as a boiling point at the moment, waiting for that one negative news, just like as it was done in the UK, to get the country into an inferno. And also this report from the SABC. But what do you guys think? What do you guys think about Gayton Mckenzie's speech in this video, Thabo Mbeki's thoughts, and also the issue with the multi-choice and providing games for free for South Africans to watch? Share your thoughts in the comments.